We're going to explain how to handle HTTP basic access denied and fatal authentication failed errors when working with remote Git repositories. These errors usually mean Git can't authenticate you with the remote server, preventing you from pushing or pulling changes. Let's break down the common causes and solutions. 1. Incorrect username or password. This is the most frequent culprit. Double-check your credentials. Typographical errors are surprisingly common. If you're using a password manager, make sure it's correctly populated and up to date. If you've recently changed your password, ensure you're using the new one. 2. Two-factor authentication, 2FA. Many services now use 2FA for enhanced security. Its basic authentication usually doesn't support 2FA directly. You'll need to generate a personal access token, PAT, or deploy SSH keys instead. For PATs, navigate to your Git provider's settings, for example GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. Create a new token with the necessary permissions, and use this token as your password when configuring your remote repository in Git. Remember to treat your PAT like a password, keep it secret and don't share it publicly. 3. SSH keys, recommended. SSH keys offer a more secure and streamlined authentication method. You generate a key pair, public and private, on your local machine. The public key is added to your Git provider's account, while the private key stays on your machine. Git uses the private key to authenticate you without requiring you to type your password every time. Setting up SSH keys involves generating the key pair using shkeygen, copying the public key, and adding it to your account settings on the Git provider. Then configure your Git remote to use SSH instead of HTTPS. 4. Incorrect remote URL. Verify that the URL you're using to connect to the remote repository is correct. A simple typo can cause authentication failures. Check your write_git/config, write file to confirm the URL is accurate. 5. Firewall or proxy issues. Firewalls or proxy servers can sometimes interfere with Git's ability to connect to remote repositories. Check your network configuration and ensure that outgoing connections on the relevant ports are allowed. If you're behind a proxy, you might need to configure Git to use it. This involves setting environment variables like http_proxy and https_proxy. 6. Credential. Helper. Git credential. Helpers store your credentials securely. If you're encountering repeated authentication requests, try using a credential helper like Git Credential Manager, Windows, or Git Credential Helper, Mac OS, Linux. These helpers store your credentials, preventing you from repeatedly entering them. 7. Cached credentials. Sometimes outdated or corrupted credentials can cause problems. Try clearing your Git credentials using the appropriate command for your credential helper. Alternatively, you may delete the write_git_write folder and reclone the repository as a last resort. By systematically checking these points, you should be able to pinpoint the reason for the HTTP basic access denied or fatal authentication failed errors and resolve them effectively. Remember to prioritize SSH keys for enhanced security in the long run.